Amplified. I hope you got a great night. We want to thank you guys for being here, and we really appreciate it. So we're glad you're here. Well, tonight we are going to be continuing through our journey through the Bible, and we are going to be in 2 Kings chapter 5. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and open up into 2 Kings chapter 5, and we're going to be looking at a unique story. It's a story that I bet most of you in here have never heard. You might have heard similar stories or things that are close, but I bet it's one tonight that you've never looked at, you've never heard. And so I'm excited about that. But before we get going, this story is about healing. And I want to demonstrate that with an illustration. I have two guys. Where's Bo and Mr. Franklin? Come on up here, guys. And I want to use them to demonstrate something. This is just there's no magic here. I'm just telling you what this stuff is. All right, one of you guys stand here. Stand right over here. Not both of you. One there, one there. Come on, man. All right. Fix you guys' touch. You're good. All right. Mr. Isaac, go ahead and take that. Both hands. Both hands right there. It's just a simple piece of tissue paper. Bo, take the other side. Hold it a little bit tighter. Don't rip it, but hold it apart. All right? And so we have a simple piece of tissue paper there, right? Now, tissue paper is pretty fragile, right? Pretty fragile, most of you would agree. But it's strong enough to hold a couple marbles if these guys can hold it steady. There you go. Smart guy right there. All right? And so it's able to hold a couple of marbles. But what do you think would happen if I was to take some water and start to drip it on that? Is it all right? Wow. What'd you guys do? It was Bo. It was Bo's fault, huh? It's Bo's fault, all right? So go ahead. You guys can go ahead and drop that down. Go ahead and drop that down in there. All right? So when we add the water, what happens to the paper? Why does it rip? Because it's wet. Huh? Because it's thin. It gets thinner, right? The paper gets weaker. All right? The paper gets weaker. And that causes it to fail, and fail quicker than we think. And that's the way our lives are, all right? As we go through our lives, and let's say we get sick, all right? Maybe we can handle a cold. Maybe we can handle a cut, a bruise, a broken arm. But eventually they all add up, and we grow weaker and weaker and weaker, right? And it becomes more and more difficult for us to live. And eventually, it falls away, all right? But there's hope, right? If you're sick, if you break your arm, where can you go to get help? To a doctor, right? That's right, a doctor. Where's my volunteers? They left too early. They didn't know. I didn't tell them. Now, come back up here, guys. Come back up here. And so when you go to a doctor, you take that same thin piece of tissue paper, they wrap it up, they give you medicine, and it protects you, right? Keeps you safe. Keeps you feeling well. Keeps you feeling good. Go ahead. You hold it right there. You hold it right there, right? And now, oh, whoops, I forgot to put the... See, I'm forgetting how to do my own illustration. All right? So we take these same rocks. Actually, they're different rocks. These guys dropped it in the bottom of the bucket. Oh, you made it fall like that. Come on. All right? And so you put those rocks in there, and you put them on there, and then it doesn't matter. Oh, I dropped my things in there, right? What do I do with them? You guys covered them up. There they are. All right? So now if I take this and I drop water on it, is it going to rip? Is it going to tear, right? Why not? Because it's protected. So it doesn't matter how much water. What are you doing? What are you doing? Come on. Making a mess on my stage. I can't believe you guys. I was kidding. But no matter, you guys can go have a seat. Thank you. Go ahead and throw it in there. No matter what you do, making a mess on my stage. No matter what you do, that water isn't going to make that plastic weaker, is it? It's not going to make that plastic weaker. It's going to stay the same strength because it is there to protect the paper. Well, here's the deal. It doesn't have to do with just being sick and having a doctor come and protect you. This illustration also works for sin in our lives. And every time we sin, we drop a piece of water onto that paper. And it becomes weaker, and it becomes weaker, and eventually it will fail. And when it fails and our time has come and we are standing before God, He will look at us. And if we didn't have protection, if we didn't seek forgiveness, we will fail just like the paper and be cast away from Him and out of His presence. And I use this illustration because I think it fits our story tonight about a man who was sick and is healed, but more than just his ailment is healed. So let's take a look at our story. 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 19. It picks up not with Elisha, all right? We've been talking about Elijah the last few weeks. Well, his replacement, his predecessor, is that the right word? Predecessor? His predecessor before, I don't know. The guy that came after him, all right, is Elisha. And he picked up right where Elijah left off. But chapter 5 doesn't start with Elisha. It starts with a man by the name of Naaman. I know this man is all confusing. But his name is Naaman. And Naaman is the commander of the army of the king of Aram. All right? Now, Aram is a rival nation to Israel. All right? They don't get along. They've had a lot of fights. They've invaded each other's lands, and there's this big conflict going on between them. But at this moment, there's peace. And there's no fighting going on between them. But we meet Naaman, and he is the general of that army. He is the commander, and he has had many victories. In fact, it says that the Lord has given him many victories. And he was a brave and mighty warrior, and he was in high regard to the king of Aram. And so he was a very strong, very noble, great warrior. And then it says, but he had a skin disease. And Naaman had something called leprosy. And leprosy back in those days was a death sentence. And so he was very worried, and he was nervous about it. And he went home, and he was talking to his wife, and while he was there, they had a servant girl. Now, what was unique about this servant girl is she had been captured on one of the raids to Israel. So she was an Israelite girl who became a slave to Naaman's wife. And she heard about Naaman's plight and the fact that he was sick. And she said, hey, there's a man in Samaria, a prophet of Israel. If you go to him, he will heal you. Well, this got Naaman excited. He got all excited, and he went to the king. And he said, sir, there is someone in the land of Samaria that can save me and heal my body. And so the king got excited, and they put together a letter to write to the king of Israel so that they would understand he was coming in peace. And they brought 750 pounds of silver and 150 pounds of gold. And then just to top it off, they brought 10 of the finest articles of clothing that they could find, all right? And they brought him as a gift. And so Naaman goes straight to the king of Israel. But when he gets to the king of Israel, he's in for a rude awakening because the king of Israel gets upset. And he tears his clothes and he goes, what are you doing? Are you trying to pick a fight with me? I can't heal you, and now you're going to go back home, and your king's going to go, oh, he couldn't heal us? Well, I don't like that. Let's attack him. You're trying to pick a fight with me. That's not what Naaman was doing at all. He was just coming at the word of the young Israelite girl. And so he's in for a rude awakening. The king didn't know what to do, and he was upset. And Naaman just wanted to be healed. Somehow, though, word got back to Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger to the king, and he said, send the man to me, and I will deal with him. Which was a pretty bold move, because Elisha and the king of Israel weren't getting along. The king of Israel was leading people away from God, and Elisha was trying to lead them to God, and they were in conflict. But he decided to help the king, and he decided to help Naaman. And so Naaman went to Elisha's house. And he gets there, and he gets out front, and he calls out, and he waits, and he waits. No Elisha. Elisha doesn't come. Elisha doesn't come. And he's sitting there going, what's going on? And then finally, Elisha sends a messenger. And he sends out this messenger and he says, what you need to do, Naaman, is you need to go and wash 7 times or dip yourself 7 times into the Jordan River. And Naaman goes, excuse me? What? You want me to go to the river and dip 7 times? Are you kidding me? I came all this way for that? What? He's not going to come out here and pray to Yahweh and wave his hand and I'll be healed? He wants me to go walk to a river and take a bath? That's crazy. I've got plenty of rivers where I come from. Why can't I just wash in there and I'll be healed there? Are you kidding me? And he storms off, thinking all hope is lost. But his servants come up to him and they go, hey, hey, let's think about this for a second, okay? If he would have asked you to go on some grand journey or done some great and mighty work in order to be healed, you would have done it, right? And he goes, yeah. And they go, well, then how much more would you not do this? Why would you not do this? He's just asking you to go and take a bath. What's the worst that happens? You smell anyway, so even if you're not healed, at least our noses will be better. They didn't say that. I just added that for fun. All right? But he goes, what's the worst that can happen? Just go and try it. And he goes, you know what? You're right. And so he took the words and he put his faith in the words of the messenger. And he goes and he washes himself and he dips himself 7 times into the Jordan River. And on the 7th time he comes out and his body is healed. And it says his skin is made like a young child. And he was grateful. He ran back to Elisha. And this time Elisha came out. And he proclaimed to Elisha, there is no other God in all the world except for the God of Israel. He is the one true God. And then he said to Elisha, I want to thank you. Please receive this gift that I'm giving you. All right, please take it. Take this money, take the silver, the gold, and the clothes. And Elisha says, no, I'm not going to take your money. I'm not going to take your stuff. And he begs him, please take it, please take it. And Elisha continues to refuse. Because it wasn't his money to take. It wasn't his reward to receive. And so he refused. But then before Naaman had gone, remember he had just found God. He had given his life over to God. He said 2 things. He said, Elisha, is it okay if I take some dirt? Oh, that sounds crazy. Why would you take dirt? But can I take some dirt back with me so that I can build an altar so that I can worship your God? Now it's his God. And Elisha says yes. And then he says, but I have a request. I need to ask for a pardon. Will God pardon me, your servant? Because you see, when I return home, I am the general to my king's army. And there will come a time where he will ask me to go into the temple of his God. And he will ask me to worship alongside him. And I will not worship, but I will have to kneel as part of my job. Will the Lord God pardon me? And Elisha said, go in peace, letting Naaman know that he was good and that he would be pardoned as long as he worshiped God. And so again, we finally have, it seems like we go through long stretches of unhappiness in the Old Testament, but we finally have a happy story. A story where there was someone who was hurting and ailing, and now they are healed. And not only are they healed, but they found something great. They found faith in God. And so tonight I want us to examine this story. And I want us to look at 3 faith lessons that we can take from this story. And the first faith lesson is this. We need to recognize that we have a disease. We need to recognize that we have a disease. All right? Despite how great Naaman was, he had a disease. He was the greatest warrior in his land, all right? He was the greatest, his name was on everyone's tongue there. He was victorious all over, and everybody loved and cared for him. But it didn't matter how great of a warrior he was, because he had something that was weakening him, like those water droplets on the tissue paper. They were weakening him. And no matter how strong he was, they kept making him weaker and weaker and weaker. And that leprosy would eventually kill him if he didn't do anything. You see, I don't know how many of you know what leprosy is. It's not as big of a deal now because we can heal it, but back then there was no cure. And what leprosy does is it attacks your glands and it attacks your nerves, and eventually it severs your nerves to where you have no feeling. And that doesn't sound like that too bad of a thing. Man, if I hit my thumb with the hammer, I'm good, no pain. But the problem is if you get a cut or you break a bone, you won't realize that you're hurt because you can't feel anything. And it'll become infected. And it'll become, have staph or gangrene, and eventually you'll have to cut those body parts off because they're too infected and too rotted to continue having them in part of your body. And it would eventually lead down that road until everything was gone and the entire body and nervous system shut down. And so it was a terrible thing. And he needed help. He needed help. And he needed to find, and he needed to do whatever it took to gain help. And he got hope. He got hope through that Israelite servant girl. And then he sought the help that he needed. And like Naaman, we need to realize that we have a disease. We have a disease called sin. And for us, just like Naaman, sin is a death sentence. And if we don't seek out help, if we don't receive help, our death sentence is going to wind us up, separated from God, thrown into a lake of fire to forever live out our lives in hell. And one sin, one droplet of that water onto that tissue paper is what separates us from God, because we are no longer perfect. And we are no longer there with him. And I know some of you may be here thinking, Pastor Luke, it's kind of harsh. It may be harsh, but it's also the truth. And you need to understand something. If you have sin in your life, which all of us do, and you don't find a cure, you don't find the remedy, that is exactly what's going to happen. No good work, no good deed, you can't earn your way past it. Nothing can happen. You will end up separated from God. And that's a hard truth to swallow sometimes, because especially in our world, we want to be told that everything is rainbows and unicorns. We want to be told that everything's going to be okay and we can earn our way out. We can do all these things. But here's the deal, guys. That's not the truth of the matter. And I know sometimes it can be hard to hear, but here's the way I look at it. I look at it like this. If we were out here on Olive Drive, all right, and I was walking down the sidewalk and you were walking down the sidewalk and you had your earphones in and your music turned up and you're on social media or playing a game, and you go to step out into the street on Olive Drive and I see a bus coming, you'd want me to do everything in my power to pull you out of that bus's way, right? I mean, most of you would, I would think. At least you would hope so. You'd want me to jump, yell, scream, run over there, grab you, pull you out of the way, push you out of the way. And that's what you would want. But here's the deal. You're so busy in your phone and on your earphones that when I grab you and I pull you out of the way and I throw you onto the ground so you don't get hit, you're going to turn around and go, "What the heck, Pastor Luke? It busted my elbow. Everything's hurting now. What's going on? I can't believe you did that." And I'm going to go, "Bus," and you're going to go, "Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. My elbow doesn't hurt quite so bad anymore." All right? And that's what we have to understand. That's the way we need to present to our friends. A bus is coming, and it's called hell. And if we want to save our friends, we want to keep our friends from getting hit by that bus, we sometimes have to cause pain. We sometimes have to call them out. We have to let them know that they have a disease. And as hard as it is to hear that we are evil, no good, dirty, rotten, lying, stealing, God-hating human beings, we have to understand that that is who we are. And we need to be warned about the bus that is coming. And we need to speak out and tell our friends so that we can spare them getting hit by the bus. Because here's the deal. Naaman received hope from an Israelite young girl. We received hope from an Israelite carpenter, the Son of God, who came in and died for us. When you get sick, you go to a doctor, right? Because you want to get well. Well, you're sick. You have a disease, but you don't need a doctor. You need a Redeemer. And you need to come to him and ask him for his forgiveness. So the first faith lesson for tonight is recognize that you have a disease. The second faith lesson for tonight is this. We need to learn how we should respond. How should we respond? How did Naaman respond, right? What did Naaman do? Well, he heard that there was hope. He gathered up some chariots. He gathered up a bunch of gold. He gathered up some silver. He gathered up some clothes, and he took off. He traveled hundreds of miles. He went to, think about this, he went to the enemy king's palace to plead for help. To the enemy king's palace. And it's not like they didn't know who he was. This is the greatest warrior in Aram. And here he is showing up on the king's door asking for help. That makes zero sense. But that's what he was willing to do. He was willing to sacrifice everything, to give up everything, just so that he could be healed. And he went. And he went to Elisha. But here's the problem. When he got to Elisha, what happened? Things didn't go the way he thought, did they? And he got upset. He got frustrated. He started yelling. But the reality was this. His expectation was wrong. All right? Naaman's expectation was wrong. He expected it to be more difficult. Dwight L. Moody, who is a famous pastor, I'm going to quote him several times tonight because I thought his insight was great. But Dwight L. Moody, when he was preaching on this passage, he said this quote, Naaman had marked out a way for the prophets to heal him, and he was mad because they did not follow his plan. All right? He had marked out his own way for the prophets to heal him, and he was mad because they didn't follow his plan. And here's the deal. He had done everything he could, right? He had done everything. He had traveled hundreds of miles. He had brought all this money, all of this stuff. And he's upset because it wasn't as difficult as he thought it should be. Even his men said, if it wasn't some great act, wouldn't you do it? And he goes, yeah, I would have done whatever he asked. And he goes, then why wouldn't you go take a bath? And that's the problem we have to understand. A lot of times as sinners, before we come to know Christ, we expect forgiveness to be complicated. All right? We expect it to be difficult. Man, if I'm going to get to heaven, I've got to be a good person. I've got to work as hard as I can to be good. I've got to do all of these acts so that I can please God, so that hopefully when I get there, God will say, hey, you did a good job, welcome in, right? Well, there may be some of you here who are like, there is no hope for me. I am just a terrible human being, and there's no hope. There's no way God could ever forgive me. God won't forgive me. I've done too much bad stuff. Why would he forgive me? And we make it more complicated than we thought. We make it more difficult than it is. The fact of the matter is it's simple. It's not about rituals. It's not about works. It's just about a substitute. And if we are willing to submit to his will and place our faith in him, then we can be saved. All right? Naaman was asked to go to the Jordan River and dip himself in it 7 times. And that's what it took. It took his trust and his faith in those words to go and do it. If he would have gone back to the rivers in Damascus where he was from, and he would have dipped himself in 7 times, would he have been saved? No. If he would have stopped off at a pond or a spring and dipped himself in 7 times, would he have been saved? No. What saved him was not the waters. It wasn't the Jordan River. What saved him was his faith and trust in God. when he said, I will do what God has asked me, he was rewarded by being healed. And when he was healed, he realized that the God of Israel, Yahweh, is alive and well. And he makes that proclamation, right? He goes back and he makes that proclamation and he says, there is no God in the whole world other than the God of Israel. And he proclaims that in front of everybody, for everyone to see. You see, here's the point. Faith that does not lead to obedience is no faith at all. Faith must be followed by obedience. Why was he saved? Because he had faith and he obeyed what he was told. And in the same way, we must be obedient to God and do what he says and follow his commands. Trust in him, put our faith that he will save us, and follow his laws. You see, we're not here. Christianity, a relationship with Jesus Christ, isn't here to suppress you or to hold you back or to keep you from having fun. It's not to keep you down and bent in. What it is here for is it is here to protect you, to reward you, and to give you help. A lot of people look at Christianity and they go, oh, that's the no fun religion. That's a religion where if you don't, you got to follow all of these rules and all of these laws, and you've got to do this, 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 and this if you want to be saved. And the fact of the matter is, no, that's not what it's about at all. What it's about is a relationship. And that relationship, you put your faith in God, and you follow what he says, and he protects you from all of the evil of the world, and he provides that I just forgot what I was going to say. He provides the ability for us to not only be protected, but to be ushered into heaven. He is the Ziploc bag that goes around our tissue paper. He is what protects us. And it's not confining us or keeping us down, but it's protecting us from the dangerous world that is around us. So we have to recognize that we have a disease. We need to recognize how we should respond. And then once we have put our faith in God, we need to learn how to serve the Lord. And here's some ways that we can serve the Lord. This passage gives us three examples. The first example is of Naaman himself. He put his faith in God. He trusted him. And then what did he do? He took up some dirt, right? He took up some dirt and he took it home because he was going to build an altar. And that sounds strange, right? Why would he take dirt? That makes zero sense. He's going to worship God. Why would he take some dirt? Now, he took enough dirt. He took all the dirt that 2 donkeys could carry. That's what he took. So that's quite a bit of dirt. So why did he take it? Well, number one, there was the thought that the God resided in the lands, and he wanted to take some of God with him. But the bigger reason is it was going to be a witness. Because when everybody sees this guy come walking in and he's got 2 camels loaded down with a bunch of dirt, they're going to go, what in the world are you doing? And he's going to get to tell them, I went to Israel and their God is alive and well. And not only did he heal me, but he brought me into his kingdom. And he saved me from all that was fighting. And just like he took dirt, we have the Word of God. And we can take it with us wherever we go. And when people ask us, what is that? We can say, this is the truth that I live by. This is the book that changed my life. That showed me that I was evil. And that I was destitute to death. But that my God sent his Son to die for me. The second example is Elisha. Elisha could have easily accepted the reward, right? He could have accepted the reward, taken it in, and been a rich man. But he refused. And he refused for a specific reason. He refused because it wasn't his reward to take. But it also didn't allow Naaman to go, look, I paid for my healing. Naaman came and he received his healing because of his faith and his obedience, not because he paid 750 pounds of silver and 150 pounds of gold and 10 sets of clothing. Elisha was humble and he refused the gift. And then the last example is this. And we almost forget about her. She's almost an afterthought, but that is the young Israelite slave girl. She's taken from her home. She's stripped away from her country, from her God, from her people, but she didn't lose faith. She knew who was there. She knew that God was alive and well, and it all began with her. If it wasn't for her, Naaman would have had no hope. And so we can't underestimate the power of a simple witness. You can't underestimate the power of a simple witness. And it is our job to be that simple witness. Well, I'm not like you, Pastor Luke. I don't have tons of knowledge. Great, doesn't matter. But I don't read my Bible that often. Great, doesn't matter. Well, then how can my witness be effective? All you need to do is tell people what God did for you and in your life. That's what's important. And that's what we need to look for. And that's how we need to be a witness. Because here's the truth, guys. Our Ziploc bag is God's Son, Jesus Christ. And He's not just the best option. He's the only option. And if you want the cure for our disease, you need to come to Him in faith and obedience. Let's pray. Right now.